Today's guest is Michael McGreevy, who helps men find their authentic identity. We're going to go deep into figuring out our purpose. Welcome to Richer Soul, your journey to a more purposeful, intentional, amazing life. Where are you going to go and how are you going to get there? Let's figure that out together. At the core is the financial well-being to be able to do what you want, when you want, how you want. It's about personal freedom and abundance. Please check out the Facebook page at facebook.com/Richer Soul. That's where I share interesting articles about what I've read this week. Also, stop by the website, richersoul.com. You can sign up for the email list. I don't send many emails. And if there's something important or some bonus material, that's the best way to find out about it. And actually, while you're at it, if you have Gmail or one of the other email subscribers, if you can go in and approve Rocky@richersoul.com so that my email doesn't end up in your junk folder. So, are you creating the life you deserve? That's the question you need to answer. It happens one step at a time, and it's the journey where the fun happens. My goal is to help you figure out your puzzle pieces and how they come together to design a great life. That means we have to understand where we're going. In other words, what's our purpose? We're going to talk about that today. We also need to be healthy enough to be able to do what we want and have the time to be able to do so. We need the financial resources to fund the life we choose. Living a life alone gets kind of lonely, so creating strong relationships and being part of something bigger spiritually. While we all know this, and yet we're stuck listening to the voices in our head that create fear and hold us back from the life we deserve. We're going to talk about that today as well. If you've not listened to episodes 1 through 9, I encourage you to go back and listen to the framework behind Richer Soul and how to create balance in your life. Too often we have so many competing priorities. We need to find a way to keep them in harmony. Many times work jumps on us, or the family pulls us, or finances go south. Having someone to help you look over all these pieces and find balance is the job of the conductor. And if you want to climb Mount Everest, you'll need a few Sherpas, guides who know the way and can help you get to the top. In both of these roles, it's you who has to do the work. I'm just here to guide, teach, and show a path. Before we begin, I want to talk about the book, The Obstacle is the Way, because we mention it later on. It's from Ryan Holiday, and it talks about how the obstacle is what makes us stronger. The first part is about perception. How do we look at problems? What can we control? And how do we remove our emotions from the issue? The second part is about taking action. What are the steps that we can do today? What's the next step? And continuing down that path. The last part is about the will to keep moving, that drive inside us. It really focuses on controlling ourselves and making us a better person. We're all going to face adversity. What are you going to do to overcome from it? Let's hear from Mike McGreevy and the adversity he's overcome and how he now helps people. Welcome to Richer Soul, Mike. It's great to have you join us today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Rocky. It's awesome to be with you today.
It's always a pleasure to have you. So let's start at the beginning. What was it like when you were growing up, and how much did your family and school teach you about money?
I had an incredible childhood. I have great parents. They were always very present. We lived out in the country, so we got to play in the woods, and we rode our bikes to school and wandered through the neighborhoods and just had an awesome upbringing. My parents didn't have any money. My father was a Catholic school teacher, and my mother stayed at home. And basically the policy in our house on money was, we don't have any, so we can't spend any. So I was very acquainted with shopping at the Goodwill. We looked for day-old bread. We didn't really spend money on much, but my parents, like to this day, I don't know how they did it, because we felt like we were rich. Our life was amazing. We always had plenty to eat. We always had everything we needed. Somehow they made it work. But as far as money and what I learned about how to manage money, it was don't spend it. That was about the extent of it.
And you can still be happy not spending money.
Amazingly, yes. That's when your needs are taken care of, I think.
Absolutely. And I think there's a vast difference between needs and wants. And today there are too many wants that have somehow become needs.
Yeah, I completely agree. What's happened is we've been left in this place of really needing relationship and time with family because we've been focusing so much on other things that we haven't had that focus as much on just spending good quality time together.
That's very true. So you have very young kids. What are you planning to do to teach them about money?
I am pretty excited about this because I did learn from the great Dave Ramsey much later in life than I would have liked. But I really want to teach my kids how to feel that connection with work, with providing value. When you offer value to somebody, then they can give you, like Rabbi Daniel Lapin says, certificates of appreciation. So I really want to teach my kids from a young age that they need to offer something of value in order to earn money.
And I think that's an important lesson. And it's also important to figure out how to offer something of value. It's a different mindset because you're not saying, what do I want? You're saying, what does that other person want? It's a very different way of looking at life.
Yes, it sure is. I think the more that our society moves forward, especially here in America, a lot of folks begin to feel that there's something owed to them simply because perhaps they were born or perhaps they live and breathe and therefore somebody should be providing for me, whether that be the government or my family or somebody else who has more money than I. I think it's going to be a challenge to really hold fast to showing my kids that you do have to provide something for other people of value.
Exactly. And I think it's changing your expectations to gratitude. That kind of shifts your whole mindset. You don't have the longing. You're thankful for what you have. And as you talked about with your story, you didn't grow up with a lot of money, but you had a loving, wonderful childhood memory.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
So let's shift gears a little bit. You did have a tough time growing up in another way with some issues around anxiety. Would you care to share that story?
I sure will. Right around junior high, I remember standing in the lunchroom and having a major anxiety attack. It's hard to explain, but anyone that has experienced anxiety before knows what I'm talking about. You feel a complete lack of control and a fear washes over you. It almost feels like you are on the doorstep of death. I'm not exactly sure where that came from or how that came about, but after that happened, it got worse and worse and worse. In high school, there were times when the teacher would call on me and I was so fearful and so worried that I would have a panic attack that I would often pretend that I had used the restroom so I wouldn't have to answer the question. There were times when I stayed home from school because I was just so consumed with fear and I didn't want to talk to anyone, didn't want to face anyone, didn't want to have to interact with my friends or have to go to school. I just begged my parents not to send me to school. And it progressed on through college. I experienced it. It got a little bit better. I learned how to manage it a little bit better. But I didn't get to the root of the problem. Really, I just found different ways to mask it and to cover it up and to manage it. But the issue was still there, and it was pretty deep.
And so how were you able to overcome this?
Yeah, it wasn't a pill, I can tell you that much, Rocky. And it wasn't counseling. It was a tragedy, believe it or not. Somehow I did move on to graduate from college, but when you are consumed by this much fear and anxiety, it's pretty difficult to think about the future, to think about your vision, to think about what you want in life and who you can become and what your purpose is. And just because you're so consumed with trying to get through the day, you're thinking through, okay, how can I have limited time or exposure to people so I can make it through the day and have enough energy? It was so life controlling that your mind doesn't go there. So by the time I graduated from college, I wasn't thinking about what I wanted to become and where I wanted to go. I was thinking about survival. So my next job out of college was on a construction crew. We built houses, so it was a framing crew. If you're not familiar with construction, that's the bones of the house, the beams and the studs and all the wood that you see, all the way from the foundation up to the roof. But I was working one day with a friend on the second deck. And he was a great kid. He was in process to become a Secret Service agent. There were several people coming by the work site to interview us and to check on him. Just a really bright, charismatic, fun-loving kid. Everyone loved being around him. So he was just there to pick up a couple extra bucks on his way to what his true dream was. So we were working together on the second floor of the house, right around the stairwell. And there was a banister, a temporary railing put up around the stairwell. In order to build the wall around that stairwell, we needed to take that temporary railing down. But his name was Brad, and he didn't notice where he was walking. He was doing something else, walking backwards, pulling another board off of another area. And I looked over at him, and he stepped backwards and fell 2 stories down onto his head into the basement. I remember locking eyes with him, and he just had this look of fear, knowing that he was falling. And I heard him hit the ground and into the basement. And you got to remember, Rocky, that I am still a fearful guy at this point. I'm in my early 20s, still had anxiety issues, still lacked direction in my life. So this just perpetuated it. I was a mess on that day. But I knew I had to do something. So I ran down and got my boss's cell phone out of his truck and handed it to him. He called 911. I jumped down into the basement to try to help Brad. But I don't know if you know this, but when you have head trauma, your body automatically throws up. And there was vomit everywhere. There was about 2 inches of water in the basement as well. His body was in an awkward slump. But I had to try to save him. I gave him CPR. I tried to revive him, and nothing was working. So eventually the ambulance showed up. Felt like an hour later. I just felt helpless. I felt like there's nothing I could do, and I almost felt responsible that I couldn't do anything to save this guy. The trauma of it all alone was enough to push me over the edge with my fear and anxiety. But then just the feeling of loss and the feeling of all the people he knew that he wouldn't get to do his life with anymore, that would miss him, that his girlfriend, his parents. And I remember that night, my boss and I went over to the hospital where they had taken him, and we basically had to tell his parents what had happened to him. And I will never forget the look in his mother's eye. Her face was red from crying, and she just looked at me and said, "What happened to my son?" through tears. She was kneeling on the ground asking me what happened to my son, and I was frozen. I didn't have the words. I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. And to this day, I remember that as being the worst day of my life so far. So a couple months later, my family and I were on a vacation with another family. It was nice to get away from everything because we had gone through funerals and interviews with OSHA and all kinds of different things surrounding that tragedy. But I was just exhausted. I was a mess. I had a lot of emotional trauma going on inside me. So it was nice to get away. And we spent some time at the beach. And I remember one day I was out there in the ocean, boogie boarding. I loved boogie boarding. So it was such an escape for me, just being in the waves here in the ocean, getting to ride waves into the shore. After a while, it felt like I couldn't get back in. Undertow started pulling me out. And I was a pretty big guy, a pretty good swimmer. I started to get a little worried. Well, I don't know if I'm going to make it back in. I better try to figure out a way to get back in soon here before this becomes a problem. And I was getting tossed around by the waves, and I fought and finally got back. But man, I was exhausted just from fighting the waves and trying to get back in. And then I looked over my shoulder, and two family friends, two girls who were in their early teens, young girls, were way out in the ocean, like way out, way farther than I was. And they were waving to me for help. They were clearly stuck out there and getting swept away in the undertow. And the first thought in my mind is, well, there's nothing I can do about this. I just had no self-confidence, no self-worth. I felt, man, I got to find somebody that can help these girls, because I certainly can't. There's nobody on the beach. I looked around, there was no one around. If I would have tried to go find their parents, that would have taken way too long. And I believe this was a gift from God. Immediately, that memory of me looking at Brad's parents in the hospital and seeing his mother's red face, just uncontrollably crying with grief. I realized that if I went back to find these girls' parents, I'd be having that conversation again. So essentially reliving the worst day of my life so far. And I thought about what my other option was, which was drowning, because I wasn't going to be able to save them. I was exhausted. I didn't think I could get to them. And you know what? That sounded like a better option than having to relive the worst day of my life. The anxiety would be gone. I wouldn't have to deal with the fear that ruled my life. So I picked the lesser of the two options, which was to jump into the water. Funny thing happens when you're not worried about anything but dying. You're not thinking about much. You don't really think about the pain of swimming or the physical exhaustion that you're experiencing. And so I assumed that I'd be dying and drowning in the water. So I said, who cares? I'll keep swimming. Whatever. I'll just keep swimming. But before I knew it, I started getting closer to these girls. And then something happened in my mind. For the first time, I believed that I might actually reach them. And what if we made it back in alive? And I got closer and closer, and I was getting beat up by the waves, but I got closer. And then I saw their faces. They were crying, they were upset, they were scared. And I just looked at them and I said, we are going to make it back in. Hold on to my shoulders and don't let go, and don't stop swimming until we make it there. And so they grabbed my shoulders, and all three of us swam like we had never swam before. The waves were crashing over us. We were getting pulled back a couple feet. Every couple feet we made progress. Then we'd get pulled back another couple feet. And we kept fighting, and we were exhausted. But before we knew it, we felt the hard sand under our feet. And we realized that we were going to make it back into the shore. But an interesting thing happened, and this is the crux of the whole story. For the first time in my life, I believed that I had strength in me, that I had something to offer to other people, that there was a purpose for my life. And that's when everything started to change, and I started to explore what that meant for me, which was about a 10-year process. But maybe I'll stop there and see if you have any comments.
No, it's an amazing story. And we've talked in the past about mindsets and how in a blink of an eye, life changes. Life changed for that young man who fell and for his family in the blink of an eye. Life changed for you in that moment where you found hope in the blink of an eye. And I think it's up to people to realize that life can give you those blinking moments, but you also have the choice to blink yourself and then change where you're going to go. And it's not going to be easy. As you said, you had that change moment. It still took you 10 years. But until you see the possibility that you can do something, then there's no hope at all. I'd like to hear more about how that journey continued and what you did during those 10 years and where you're at now.
You're right, Rocky. One moment is not enough. You have to respond to that moment in a way that sets you on that new trajectory. And I wish I could say that from that day on, I was all gung-ho and positive and ready to take on the world, and I knew what I wanted to do, and nothing was going to stop me. But it was not that at all for me. It was a real struggle. I had lots of things that I needed to work through and lots of ways of thinking that I needed to reframe. I continued to search for meaning in what I was doing for a job. What that led to is me going from job to job to job and always being disappointed and not truly knowing who I was. Through my random job searches, and I won't say that it was all a waste of time, there were things that I learned along the way in each different direction I went in. I've done everything from cutting down trees to working in a warehouse to sales, legal document sales, to working at a nonprofit. I just went in so many different directions thinking that that was the way I was going to find my thing. But what I didn't realize is I needed to look within and look and discover what my true identity was and what my true purpose in life was. I always knew deep down that I had a heart for investing in other people. And I would do this for fun sometimes. I would take people who were struggling out to coffee and just talk to them, listen to them, pray with them. I was involved at my church. I organized a men's Bible study, get involved in other things in church as well. I always knew that I had this will to help others see their potential and move forward in life. Just because I think it was such a dramatic change for me, going from being overcome with anxiety to then finding some strength and being able to move forward from that. One day I had my own construction business for about 5 years. I used to listen to podcasts all the time when I was working. I came across this podcast called 48 Days to the Work You Love by Dan Miller. And as I was listening one day, he was talking about coaching. He was talking about how you can help others see their potential, help them move forward in life and become everything they were made to be. And that he had a conference that I could go to learn more about that and even start my own coaching business. Something clicked in me right there. And I said, I need to do that. That is me. That is my heart. I want to work with people. I want to motivate them, inspire them, help them move forward, help them find their strength, help them find their individual, unique, authentic identity so they can move forward in life. And so I signed up for that conference right away, went down there and signed up for his coaching school. I had my first client by the time I was on my way home from that conference. That began my interest in coaching and my coaching career. It was about almost 5 years ago.
Wow, Dan Miller is definitely great. I listened to his podcast as well. I haven't had a chance to go down and meet him. I guess it's one of the things I will have to put on my list to do. We talk about that up front. When you don't know your purpose and you don't know what you want to do, everything else is so difficult. But once you have clarity of where you're going and what you want to do, and you write it down and you tell the world, it becomes much easier to put the plan in place. And in addition to that, the universe has a way of opening up and providing you opportunities because now you know where you're going and you can focus on that, and things start to fall into place. And not that it's going to happen overnight. You've been doing this for 5 years. It takes time. You still have to take those steps and do the difficult work. But at the end of the day, once you know where you're going, it is much easier to get there than when you have no clue what you want.
I completely agree. And that's not easy. And what I will say is you can't sit still and wait for your purpose to come to you. It does take some sampling. If you have an idea about what that is, but you're not sure, you do have to take a step in that direction to explore it more. You're never going to understand your purpose fully just by waiting for it to come to you.
Well, yes, you're correct. I think some people are lucky and they know it when they're kids. I think the majority of us don't. I think most of us have to struggle through and figure it out. I think one of the easy ways is to cross out everything you don't want to do, because then at least it leaves you less choices that you have to make. It makes life a little bit easier, but you have to take the time to be intentional and mindful with that and say, what is it that I do want? And then make sure that's really what you want. I think a lot of times people think they want something because they see somebody else has it and, well, that looks good, but it's somebody else's dream. It's not yours. And you have to be very intentional to make sure that you're picking your choice.
That's a great point, Rocky. You know, when you're not where you want to be, we very often look outward and see other people who are where they want to be. And just for the simple fact that they're successful, it's easy to reach out and say, oh, I want to be like them. That's such a great point. So I think it's so important to really dig in and figure out who you are and what you are about. That's something that is difficult to do. It takes time. It takes reflection. It takes asking the right questions and digging in. Often, we bring a whole lot from our childhood into our adulthood. So we experience things when we're kids that sometimes affect our thinking well up into our adult years. What I've found is if you don't dig into some of those things, especially the negative ways of thinking that you picked up, then they're going to have a stronghold in your life as you move forward as an adult. So that's a big part of what I do as coaching, in my coaching process as well, is to help guys uncover some of those ways that they believe lies about themselves or about others or about the way the world works that then are affecting their success today.
I agree with that as well. I know your money mindsets generally are formed between the ages of 5 and 12. And the things that occur as you're growing up cause you to have these money scripts that may or may not be right. I think it affects you psychologically across all the other areas as well. Many times I think we end up with fears, and those fears prevent us from taking the next step. Or we have these mindsets and thoughts that prevent us from the success that we can achieve if we let go of those thoughts and realize that they aren't true. So what are some of the most common things that you've seen that hold people back?
The specifics are very different for every guy, but I can share one story. There's a gentleman I worked with, I'll call him Dave, and he had an experience when he was a kid where he was at camp, and as a part of camp, they have a swimming test that all the campers have to take in order to pass and move on. And all the parents are watching and all the friends are gathered around the lake to watch. And so Dave goes out there to take his test. After he finishes, the instructor says, "Sorry, you failed." He looks up and sees his father with his head down and his hand in his face, shaking his head, almost in embarrassment. Now, I'm sure the father didn't mean anything by it. He probably didn't even think his son was watching. But the damaging part of that was he walked away thinking that he was a failure. Now, fast forward about 30 years. This guy is a top performer in what he does. He's part of a company that has about a 200-person sales team. He's in the top 10. And he's not even fully applying himself. He's going through the motions, feeling like he's kind of stuck, wondering why he's not that top 1 or 2 salesperson. But what we uncovered is that this feeling of being a failure kept him from moving forward to be his absolute best. He was fully capable of being that number 1 salesperson, fully capable of knocking it out of the park and leaving everyone else in the dust on his team. But because he had this root of feeling that he was a failure, he just could not advance past that. So we actually had to go back there and restructure his thinking and help him move past that through some healing, through some prayer, through some different exercises that I took him through. And now that he knows that there's no truth to that fear of failure, he has changed the way that he works completely. He's fired up. He's approaching that top sales position, and it's changed everything. So what I tell guys is, you may not be where you want to be because you have something from the past that is convincing you that you cannot be that or you are not that. So that's a huge one, is fear of failure.
Who help people in this area is that thought that I am not enough prevents people from success. That kid probably thought when he came out of that swim test that he wasn't enough because he had failed. And the second part of I am not enough is I won't be loved. And he probably thought he lost his father's love at that moment. And that sticks and holds into you for years to come. And so as parents, we need to be aware of that up front and make sure that we don't do that to our kids, that we make sure that we spend the time to show them that failure is just learning, and we need to change that mindset. And if we've experienced that ourselves, then we need to work through and make the changes to let go of those stories that hold us back.
Man, that's so insightful, Rocky. I love what you said about love. Will I be loved if I don't achieve this? Man, that's a big one. Isn't that underneath it all? That question of it, will I be loved? So good.
It's a basic human emotion. It's one that underpins everything.
Totally agree.
So finding your authentic identity isn't always easy. How do you help people to do that?
There's a number of ways I do that, but I think the most powerful way that I've experienced so far is just one-on-one coaching. So I take people through an exercise where they look back at the defining moments in their life, and they look at them and ask themselves, what did I think as a result of this major event in my life? Why do I remember it so clearly? How did it affect the way that I lived? How does it affect the way that I think now? Sometimes I believe we're born with our identity, and then as life happens to us, it gets messed with. It gets altered. We get convinced that it's something else. We have to get back to what that true identity is. So there's a number of exercises I take my clients through that help them ask those difficult questions about, well, what is it? If it's not these lies that I've believed about myself, if it's not that I'm a failure or that I'm not enough or whatever that message has been to you, well, after we disagree with those things, after we remove those things from our list of options, we have to find out what it truly is. And so there's a number of questions that are asked just about, well, what makes you come alive? When are you doing something that you can forget you can forget the time? Time just passes so quickly when you're doing this. What is it for you? And so there's a number of different things. And there's also asking the folks around you too. Those people that really know you and understand you and care about you, what do they think? So I have a list of questions that you can send to the people in your life and get authentic feedback from them. So I could go on and on about the different exercises, but through one-on-one coaching, that's where we dig that stuff out and really find what that true authentic identity is. Because I found when a man knows who he is, all those other details, the why, the how, the when, all that becomes so much easier.
Absolutely. When you know your target and what you want, it's so much easier to hit it. When you don't know what that target is and who you truly are, you go in circles and you chase the latest shiny object or what you think is success or what someone else's success was, but isn't yours. And so I think it's important to go through this process. And I mean, you can do it yourself. I'm sure people can Google and find questionnaires to ask themselves. You can talk to the people around you and get feedback. And one of the things I talk about, and it's a Bible quote, I'm sure you're very familiar with it, is iron sharpens iron, one man sharpens another. The key, though, is that you have to accept the sharpening. And in this case, I think it sounds like that's exactly you're giving people feedback, and they have to accept that feedback and digest it and learn from it, and then figure out who they are and what they want.
Rocky, I will share with your audience, I have an exercise that's a part of a course that I put together, but I'll give it to your audience apart from the course. I'll pull it out of there and just maybe you can put it in the show notes or something. But it's an exercise that'll help you really go back and figure out more about your identity. That'll be helpful.
I think that would be great. It gives people a place to start.
Excellent.
So you said you have a course. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, so what I've tried to do is take everything that I've learned through the coaching process and leading men toward their authentic identity, and I put it together in an online course. Because there's a lot of folks that maybe financially can't dive into the coaching process, or maybe just from a time standpoint, they want to be able to do that on their own time. I thought it might be easier to have all the exercises available in an online course. And so I've put everything that I've learned. I've really tried to put every tool that I have access to that would be helpful in that process into this course. So it's several videos, and I think there's about 12 PDFs of different exercises that would take people through. As a part of this interview, for your podcast listeners, I want to offer a free coaching session for any one of your listeners that wants to take this course. It's a $97 course. You don't have to take the course to get the documents that I mentioned, but if you are interested in benefiting from the course, that's what I'll offer you, a free 1-hour coaching session if you do choose to move forward on that.
That's awesome. That's so kind of you to be able to share your time like that. I encourage people, when people make offers, raise your hand, take them. It's worth it. The worst that happens is you lose an hour of your time. The best that happens is you change your life and things are amazing. And so I encourage people to do that.
Well, thank you, Rocky. It's interesting. I coach a lot of leaders, people who are very successful in business and in life. Every single one of them has something that they've gone through in their past that affects the way that they think and live and operate now. And I've found that when a man truly understands who he is, who God made him to be, the ceiling just seems to lift off of their lives. And I'm not just talking about financial success. I'm talking about a man's ability to lead his family as a father. I'm talking about a man's ability to connect on a deep emotional level with his wife. It changes everything when a man figures out who he is.
You have to have, I don't even know what the right word is, but when you have that strength of conviction in yourself, then you become a leader to those around you. I have to say, looking around, I'm quite disappointed with a lot of dads I see because they aren't leading their kids and they aren't taking control of their family's life. And they're just kind of leaving it to chance. And that's a shame because as we've talked about today, you're now putting all of these doubts and insecurities into your kid who's going to suffer with them for the next 30 years. As fathers, we need to lead our children. We need to know who we are so we can do that. Part of that is to have wonderful marriage and communication with our wives and be respectful for them and make sure that the two of us are on the same page and that we're going the same direction. Clearly, that's important.
It really is. And once you start to see that this world is bigger than you and your comfort, every decision you make with your family, within your marriage, doesn't just affect your comfort for that day. It affects generations to come. If we truly knew the weight of our actions now as men, man, our lives would be so much different. But hey, I get caught up in the day-to-day myself. We all have difficult days where the kids are out of control or things don't go the way we want them to go. We have to step up as men. I really, truly think that is the secret to changing the world, is helping men understand who they are. Because when they do and they step up and they become those leaders in their families and in their businesses, that's what changes the world.
Very true. And how do you deal with it when you have that bad day? What do you do to reset yourself?
I love that question because I used to be so bad at this. I would wallow. I would have negative self-talk just rolling through my head, and it would get worse and worse and worse. And I've actually created, this might sound crazy, but I've created a document, and I share this with some of the guys I'm close with, but what to do when you have a bad day. And I don't have it in front of me right now, but I'm happy to share that with your audience as well. I know the first thing that I think about is, how can I change the environment that I'm in right now? Like, do I need to stand up, take a walk, exercise a little bit, get my blood moving, shake me out of this funk that has come over me? It's not going to change if I stay seated in this chair. Another thing is we have to have relationships with other men. We need to be able to reach out, to get over ourselves, make a phone call. if you're having a terrible day, call one of your friends and tell them. Women tend to be great at this, right? They can call up a friend and vent to them and feel way better an hour later. Us guys, we tend to internalize things and let them perpetuate in our minds, and we get to a bad place. So I would say, if you're going to take one thing away from this, is reach out to a friend and tell them you're having a bad day. Most of the time they're going to say, oh man, that happened to me last week, or I totally get it. What can I do to help? You'll already feel better just from articulating it.
That's great advice. Thank you for sharing that. And I think it's also important that we pick the kind of friends and circle that will do that for us, and to be intentional in who we surround ourselves with, because everybody has problems. Everyone's got a bad day. It's pretty cool that you're intentional in having your manual for what to do when you have a bad day, because then you don't have to think about it. You just execute. And that makes life so much easier. It would be great if we had a lot more manuals for other parts of our lives so that we could just say, oh, I'm having this. Let me pull out this one sheet, see what I need to do, and just go execute on that. And then it would be easy.
Rocky, do you have a manual on parenting for me?
I know your kids are young, and I will tell you, I think the first 5 years are probably the hardest, because it's all take from your kids. I realize now, looking back, when the kids are young, you're always amazed when they learn something new and you're so excited about it. But the reality is, at some point, they all learn to tie their shoes. They all learn to use the toilet. They all learn to feed themselves and do all of those types of things. And while it's new and exciting for us, in the scheme of things, just relax, enjoy, and hug them. Honestly, I think that's the biggest thing you can do for your kids, is to put them to bed. And when I mean put them to bed, I mean go spend that 15, 20 minutes, half an hour hugging them as they go to sleep, because that's when they recharge their emotional tanks. And if they can recharge their emotional tanks, they can go out and walk into the world without fear. That's probably my one biggest piece of advice. At the end of the day, when it's the most difficult, go spend time with them, just hug them, read them a book, cuddle. That's all they want, is your love.
I love that, Rocky. Powerful. I'm going to do that as soon as I get off the phone with you.
Is it bedtime already?
For me.
Yeah, it's difficult when they're little. It is. But this too shall pass, and it gets easier as time goes on.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to share about your course or your coaching services?
If anything we talked about today, or that I shared today, really resonates with you, and you know you have some questions about who you truly are and what you were made to do in this life, I'd love to connect with you. Shoot me an email and we can have a conversation. I'm not going to try to sell a coaching package to you. It truly is my passion to connect with men and help them find their purpose. So you can email me at michael@mcgreevyleadership.com. If you're interested in taking the course, that's great too. That is a pre-launch price, the $97. So when it does get launched, that price will go up. But yeah, if you'd like to take that course, I think it can really help you. It gives you the tools to figure out your authentic identity. So it'd be great if you took a step in that direction.
That's cool. And for people who don't know where they're at, I highly encourage you, whether you use Mike's program or someone else's, figure out where you're at. Figure out what you want, because once you do, everything else falls into place and becomes so easy. And it's not that it's going to happen overnight. It's going to still take 10 years, 20 years, whatever the time frame. But at least you know you're going the right direction and you're enjoying that journey, and you're having fun on the way instead of kind of being stuck on the hamster wheel, wondering why nothing changes in your life.
And Rocky, can we just tell anyone who's listening right now that you are loved and you are enough? Like, I know I wake up some days when I have that same question, but you need to know that that is true, that you are loved and you are enough. So keep moving forward, give yourself some grace, realize that you have value and you have something to offer to the world. Just keep stepping forward.
As men, we don't really do that, do we? We don't say those things.
We don't.
That's
Not
a shame.
enough.
Yeah, and it's funny. I don't know how much that is of an American / European culture, because I think in other cultures it's a bit different in other parts of the world. But I'm not as familiar with all of the different cultures to say that it isn't, but I have a feeling that it is.
Yeah, well, what is that worth tied to here in America, right? It's what have you accomplished? How successful are you? How hard do you work? So wonder why guys just grind and work all hours of the night, really trying to get this question answered of, am I enough? Or did I do a good job? And am I loved? So we do need to hear that. And you need to know that, man, that you are loved and that you are enough.
As I think about what you said, it makes total sense, because if I were an evil employer, I'd want you to grind and work and keep doing. I can see how the culture gets created, because there are people who just focus on making money and using other people, and then you create that culture that sustains that kind of attitude. When you're after nothing but the almighty buck, then that's what happens, and that's a shame. But we can change it.
Yes. There is so much more to life.
That there is. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us today? Is there anything else we need to chat about to encourage the audience?
I think we've given them a heavy dose today, Rocky. I don't want to overwhelm them.
Hey, this audience is tough. They're expecting that kind of stuff. And they're the kind of people who are grateful for it and grateful for going deeper, and they want more.
Okay, well, I will say this then, if that's the case. It takes courage to look back into your life and confront some of those weak, wounded, unhealed places in your life. And if you know that you've spent your life trying to get away from those things, trying to move past them and avoiding them, I want to tell you that that's the answer to getting past them, is going toward them. Have the courage to step in the direction of those weak and wounded places that you despise about yourself, because therein lies the answer to moving forward.
And I think that was Ryan Holiday's book, right? The obstacle is the way. And it's going through that obstacle is how you achieve success. And it is a struggle, but you've got to essentially fight your own monsters. No one else can do it. And fighting other people's monsters isn't going to help you. So fight your own.
I've never heard of Ryan Holiday or that book, but I'm glad someone else is saying the same thing.
Yeah, I think he had success in something, and then he had some struggles. But yeah, the obstacle is the way. It's basically whatever it is that's preventing your success is the way to your success. It's overcoming that.
Yeah, I would confirm that. I say the same thing for fear. I mean, that's been my central struggle. And I found that going toward that fear instead of trying to escape it was what saved me.
And I think that's, for people who do have fears, I think that's what a lot of the psychologists do. They take you through your fear, put you into that situation, and teach you to overcome it. And it's the same thing in every part of every life. I seem, the more podcasts I do, we seem to come across the same themes, and they apply to every part of life. And you've just got to go face the tough things and conquer them.
Yeah. Doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to take a step in that direction. If you're afraid to speak publicly, go sign up for a public speaking opportunity. If you're afraid to have a deep conversation with your wife, schedule one. If you're, whatever you might be afraid of, take a step in that direction today, and you are going to take a huge step toward becoming more of who you are.
And the first time you do it, you're probably going to fail. That's called learning. Just accept that that is the outcome. If you expect the outcome is failure, then anything positive that comes out of it is success. And you just have to understand that the first time you do something, it's not going to work. You have little kids, right? So how many times do they have to fall down before they learn to walk? Imagine if they gave up after the first 3 failures. We'd have a whole generation of kids who never walked.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. There is no failure in trying. You take a step towards something, you try it, that is success in itself.
The only failure then is not trying. That's true failure. Well, that's cool. So if people would like to find you, would you like to tell us where your website is and how they can connect?
Absolutely. My website is McGreevyleadership.com. And if you're a husband and a father and you want to grow as a leader, I have a private Facebook group called Husbands, Fathers, Leaders. We do have challenges that go out every weekend, practical things that you can do to become better as a man. So I'd welcome you to request membership in that group if that's something that would be beneficial. But other than that, feel free to email me anytime. I'd love to chat about this stuff if you're interested. But men, the world needs you. So step up and do what it takes to be the leader of your home.
Great advice. Thank you for sharing with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Rocky. It's been a pleasure.
I encourage you to check out Michael's site and his course. Once you know your purpose, everything else in life becomes easy. www.mcgreevyleadership.com. There's a link in the show notes. And feel free to email Mike as well and take him up on his free coaching offer. If there's someone you know who could benefit from what we talked about today, please share it, as it helps you to build social capital and create better relationships and start better conversations with the people you know, and they will appreciate it. Like we talked about in the show, we all have a bad day. Maybe this episode can help someone who struggles more often. Call to action. If you're not sure what your purpose is, then now is the time to begin figuring it out. Find whatever materials will best help you to do that. If you're already clear, then take a moment to review and make sure your actions are in congruence with that purpose. So, as we close out today, what's preventing you from moving forward? And who are you putting on your team to build the life you deserve? Ready to take massive action? I'm here to help you. Build your path and create the life you deserve. Thanks for listening. You can always get me at rocky@richyoursoul.com. Have an abundant week.